Hello, my name is Clive Williams, and for those of you who don't know me, let me give you a bit of background. I was born and bred in Portsmouth. I met Sue, who was to become my wife, whilst we were both in our early teens. After a 7-year courtship, we married in 1967 here in St Wilf's because Sue was a Cowplain girl. That was 53 years ago. We now have 3 grown-up children, all happily married, and 8 grandchildren from 21 down to 4. I've not always been a member of clergy. In fact, that was never part of my original thinking. I did have church connections in the early years, for I joined the church choir at the age of 8 down in Milton, and I stayed there for the next 14 years, doing 3 services every Sunday. As a result, I ended up knowing a lot about church, very little about the Christian faith. But as a result, once we had married, Sue and I only really went to church at Christmas and Easter. For the first 20 years, I worked for Barclays Bank in various branches along the south coast. But it was not until we moved to Wimborne in Dorset that we started attending church on a regular basis, and that was, as we thought, for the sake of the children, because we wanted them to go to Sunday school. But we found ourselves being challenged by what was said from the pulpit. We learned that God was not the remote creator that we'd grown up with, and the people were interesting in that they referred to Jesus as though he was a personal friend. Sue, as a result of this, became a born-again Christian just after my 30th birthday, and that caused me to question everything that we'd held together up to that point. I had lots of questions, and the church was very good because I would go along on a Sunday and grab somebody, buttonhole them, and throw a question at them, and they'd give me an answer, and I'd kick it around in my head for a week or a fortnight, and then go back and ask another one. That went on for 9 months, and in the end, I ran out of questions. I just got to the point where I was turned to God, and it was very low-key. It was no blinding light on the Damascus Road like for St Paul. It was just me and God, and me saying, well, here I am. I know that you want me to do what Sue did, so okay, let's get on with it. That was important for me, because my conversion, if that's what you call it, was just ordinary. Nothing special, just ordinary, just me and God. The next few years saw a time of growth in faith and understanding. What was to be my last bank posting took us in 1980 to Guernsey in the Channel Islands. We were there for 3 years. But it was there that I felt the call to the Church of England ministry. That was in 1983. So we travelled back to the mainland, went to theological college in Bristol for the next 2 years. And then I became curate at Bedhampton, having been ordained. And that was the next 3 years. And then we moved to Highley in Shropshire, where I became the vicar of a single parish there in 1988. And we stayed there for 24 years, but that one parish expanded to 4 after a while, and then to 10, and then after a while back to 4 again. During that time I was also rural dean, which was an additional responsibility. That was for 9 years. And in addition I was made a prebendary of Hereford Cathedral, which is like a canon, but it's just different terminology in different dioceses. But for that I had my own stall, my special clergy seat at the top end of the church, so that if I went there for a service, I could go and sit in my own seat. I retired in 2012, and we moved back to our roots. We settled in Cowplain, and we became part of the congregation here and St Wilfrid's. But that now begs the question, how has my faith affected my life? Well, at one level, I've always grown up being aware of God, but he always seemed to be there in the background, an otherworldly figure, rather aloof, not really concerned with the big stuff, only really concerned with the big stuff like creation. And so although my early life seemed okay, once I'd been challenged by the gospel, I recognised that in my understanding there was a big chunk missing. And that was a realistic expectation about what would happen when I died. Up to that point, what I'd relied upon for my ultimate destination once life here was over was based solely on nebulous and rather wishy-washy hopes. But then, having become a committed Christian and given myself into God's hands, I acquired a sense of purpose for my present activities and the promise of an even better future when the time came. I also realised just how interested he is in our everyday lives. My relationship with him developed as a much more personal thing. It became rather less intellectual and more heart-driven. And so for the last 45 years, I've been aware of God's hands on my life, with Jesus in the background, driving my thinking and decision-making, and affecting my own instructing and directing and challenging and enabling and teaching. I can also see that my early years in banking had led me on two slippery paths. One was a striving for recognition and promotion, and the other centred around the acquisition of material possessions. Both of those have now faded into the background. I no longer look for my affirmation from other people, for God can provide all that I need in that area. And although, like everyone else, I enjoy having nice things around me, I am no longer driven by a desire to get more stuff. Finally, and this came sometime later when I'd been in ministry for some years, I recognised that I was a worrier, and that worrying about events or situations was doing a good job of destroying my sense of well-being and denying my inner peace. I was challenged by God about this, and I realised that worrying was not an inevitable aspect of life, but that it could or should be controlled by an act of will. And so I was directed to ask myself two questions. What actual influence do I have in this situation? In other words, what benefit accrues from my worrying? And the second question was, what difference will it really make if I am unable to do anything? And the answer in each case was none. As it happened, all this took place just before Lent. And so, because it's an act of will, for the next 6 weeks, I decided to stop worrying. I could still be concerned about things, but not to worry about them. And it worked. I didn't worry then, and I haven't worried since. And for that, I thank God from the bottom of my heart.